what can I do to help grow that local scene? Maybe I sponsor an event, maybe I flow them some product or something like that.
Welcome to USA FBL Fingerboard Podcast. I'm your host, Levine Cunningham, and I'm excited to be chatting with Frank Polowicz of Curious Boards. Frank, also known as Curious Boards on Instagram. Frank, thanks for coming on the podcast. How are you?
Great. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
And you, sir, are our first guest from over the pond, over the ocean.
Ooh, nice, nice. Appreciate that. I always appreciate any kind of extra exposure coming from the UK and from Europe generally.
So where exactly are you located out of?
Yeah, I'm in London. I'm in Southwest London particularly, and there's a pretty big scene here and I would say a decent amount of heritage coming from the UK. Kind of a lot of OGs and a lot of events, things like that. So it's been a great experience to get involved with the scene here.
From an American looking over,
Mm.
I can tell that there's a scene, but unless you're following everyone, it's really hard for us to really see what's going on over there.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe you can tell from my accent, I'm not British. I'm actually from the States. I've been living over here now for about 7, 8 years and a couple of other countries as well. That was actually some of the motivation for starting the brand is trying to figure out like what's going on over in the US, what's going on in Canada, what's going on in Chile, Philippines, all these other places that I didn't really know too much about. And starting the shop was a good way for me to kind of introduce myself into those scenes and to bring some of those products to the UK market that typically won't be available. As you may or may not know, it's quite expensive to import stuff generally into Europe, but in the UK particularly since Brexit. And with import fees and duties and shipping, a lot of brands that would be very commonly available in the US or other big markets like Germany typically are not available in the UK. And that's just because of how expensive it is to import stuff here. So that was a big part of the motivation for starting the brand as well.
I can first off pretty much kind of vouch for how pricey things are in the UK. I've always
Yeah.
wanted to visit the UK, but when you're comparing a vacation to Europe, not Europe, but more just like the UK,
Yeah.
you can go to Asia for 3 weeks, or you can go to the UK for 5 days and and spend the
Yeah.
exact same amount of money. And it just
Yeah.
utterly blows my mind how crazy just everything is as far as pricing, food, cost of living, stuff like that.
London particularly is quite an expensive city. The rest of the UK, it's kind of hit or miss on whether or not it's going to be expensive, but there are certain things that the UK is just known for being expensive. Train tickets here are extremely expensive. Food and drink, going to restaurants and pubs and stuff like that, also very expensive. And housing, probably the most expensive thing that people complain about here. Yeah, I'm with you on that. There's a reason why a lot of Brits go abroad in the holiday season and they don't really stay around the UK because, flight to, let's say, Spain or Portugal or France, it's, 20, 30, 40 euros sometimes. It can be very cheap. So a lot of the Brits, go over there for holiday, and a lot of the continental Europeans, they come to London. So it's quite an expensive place for sure.
No, I feel that. I feel that. So let's backtrack a little bit. You
Yeah.
said, so you were born here in the States, but ended up moving
Yeah.
over to the UK. All right. So where
Yeah.
are you from then? Because I'm really good at accents, but I can't pinpoint where you're from here in the States.
So I was born in Huntington Beach, California, so Southern California.
Okay.
But to be honest, I haven't lived in California for over 20 years, and I've lived in many places in the States. I've been all over the country, and so the last place I lived in the States was actually in Portland, Oregon, and that
Okay.
was about around 2013 time. Since then, I've lived in Ireland. I lived in Ireland for 4 years, and then I moved to the UK in 2017. So it's been about a decade or so that I haven't lived in the States. But my wife and I, we go back, once or twice a year, pretty much for holidays and family and stuff like that.
Gotcha. So what got you moving all around the country and the globe? Like, is it job or
Yeah,
is it
yeah. Definitely the job was the main reason. I come from an IT background, specifically software development, performance engineering, and information security. So a lot of my customers, I was doing a lot of consulting, typically were kind of spread out, and I had opportunity to move to Dublin. It was my first time like being able to live in Europe. So I absolutely just jumped on it. And while I was in Dublin, I met a few more people, different companies and things like that. And I got a job offer to come to London. Summer 2017, around something like that is when my wife and I moved here.
I'm jealous of like just those. I mean, we consider those to be like, once in a lifetime, like kind of opportunities and stuff. Cause, the most person, the average person, they're never ever going to go to like Ireland. Some people aren't even thinking about like, Ireland or the
Yeah.
UK and stuff like that when they're thinking about like traveling abroad. A lot of people, they're thinking like,
Yeah.
exotic places, Fiji,
Yeah.
Bali, stuff like that. And so whenever opportunities like that kind of come along your way, you definitely got to jump on those.
10 years is a long time. And, I'm 42 now. So going back to, my kind of early 30s, I definitely wouldn't have thought about living abroad or even living in Europe because of how difficult it is. That's one of the nice things about working in tech is it's kind of easy to move people around when you kind of work in that world. And so I don't really think I would have been able to do it otherwise. Getting a visa from my company and getting an extension and then changing that visa to a different country and all that. It's just I think one of the perks of working in that world. It's a lot. Moving countries is very stressful. And when you land in that country, even under the best circumstances with the best plan and you think you got it all sorted out, there's always going to be things that you can't account for, and you just kind of have to roll with it. And if you're the kind of person who is okay with that, and you're the kind of person who doesn't have a lot of stuff, because having a lot of belongings is very hard to move countries, kind of a minimalist lifestyle, then I would definitely say look into it because it's an opportunity that will really broaden your view of the world and change a lot of opinions that you may have had before.
No, definitely. You definitely got to have that go with the flow. And when there's ever like changes of plans, delays, just whatever
Yeah.
kind of hurdle or obstacle that comes your way, you just kind of like, you got to just kind of brush it off your shoulder and just kind of roll, just continue moving forward. And I notice like whenever I do travel abroad, stuff like that, it's never a flawless like journey. There's always something at the beginning or something at the end. Usually everything in the middle is perfectly fine, but it's either like getting there is an issue or getting back is an issue. And so you just
Yeah.
kind of gotta just, roll with the punches.
Yeah. I mean, like when I first arrived in Dublin, I had a decent plan, but a lot of those plans fell through like within 24 hours of landing. And like the apartment I thought I was going to get like fell through, and there was all this kind of struggle there. So yeah, I kind of lived in a hotel for a little while because I like honestly didn't have anywhere to go. And the landlords are very leery of a new person, and you don't have any rental history in that country, and you don't have any credit in that country. You have nothing. You get taken advantage of a little bit here and there, but ultimately it worked out.
When did you start fingerboarding? And so is it back here in the States or did you adopt it a little later in
Yeah,
life?
it's a good question. Yeah, so going to school in Southern California, mostly in the San Diego area, everybody had tech deck in 1998, 1999, and I'd been skating for years already. And so when the tech decks came out in the late 90s, like pretty much everyone in school had one, and I had one too, but it wasn't really something that I really remember people taking seriously at all. And it was just kind of a thing like you would sort of do as you're like waiting in a line or like, bored at your desk or whatever, you like have a tech deck, right? None of the teachers really liked it because, it's noisy. And so they would get confiscated a lot. And so I didn't really think much about tech decks for a long time, even though while I was skating pretty much every day. And, I where I grew up is like some of the nexus of the skateboarding industry. I skated a lot of those famous spots, that you see in like skate videos from the 90s, downtown San Diego, the Greyhound Gaps, Sarah High School, all those famous spots from San Diego. And like, I don't really remember having very much exposure to fingerboards at that time. I remember a couple of my friends had like homemade decks, and a couple of my friends had maybe like one of those plastic keychains that you might have seen at like a liquor store back in the day. But I just kind of forgot about it for years and years and years. And when COVID came around all these years later, and I wasn't really going into an office, I wasn't really traveling for work anymore, which I had been doing like pretty much 3 days a week for years and years. I just bought one from a store on a whim, like, oh wow, that's cool, check that out. And I think I did a Google search for something like tech deck tricks or something. And, that was probably around, I want to say like 2021, 2022 time. And that's when I discovered this like entire world. Like I discovered, Black River and Dynamic and all these deck makers. And like, I didn't really know any of that existed. I literally thought like tech deck was the only game there. So I bought my first setup, basically falling in love with it and like doing it every day. And like the frustration of trying to order stuff to the UK really got me thinking of like, okay, maybe there's a better way we can do this, and maybe I should start my own shop.
That's interesting. All right, so like the tech deck era, when it first came out, even for me, I was into tech decks because of the graphics. Like I loved certain teams, certain writers, like Kareem Campbell with Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
One of my favorite
like
skaters. Yeah, one of my favorite
his
skaters.
hard flips. I can't remember what video edit that he was doing something in, but like he's just really good at hard flips and the ghetto birds, and they're so stylish. And I
20 shot
collected,
sequence.
yeah, that's the one.
One of my all-time favorite videos of all time. Yeah.
And so I wasn't even like a City Star fan, but Kareem Campbell made me like a City Star fan. And so like I collected all the City Stars, I collected like all the Maples. And so like for me at least, I was more of a collector than like an actual like user. Even though like I played around with them, like it took me 6 months to accidentally ollie. I didn't even know like you could do tricks and stuff. And so like
same. Yeah.
I accidentally snapped it, and it literally went like half an inch off the ground, and like that was it. Like the rest was literally history.
Yeah. I was the same exact way. Like I didn't really know that there was tricks. I didn't think like it was physically even really possible to kind of mimic a sort of a skateboard trick. And yeah, when I started seeing videos of sort of modern fingerboarding, I was just like, whoa, my mind was totally blown, and I just couldn't wait to learn that stuff.
And that's kind of just like pretty much kind of the same journey. But then like Tech Tech came out with Fingers of Fury, and then that like literally opened up my entire like fingerboarding brain, because like I didn't realize that stuff could even be done. And so like visually, like back then the internet was so early stages, like you couldn't really find anything. There was no obviously Instagram, Facebook, stuff like that. And so like that video came out. Now I could see it being done. So if I can see it being done, that means it can be done. Because before that, like if you didn't see it, it didn't exist.
I do have a memory of one of my friends who, I think he had a copy of that tape, or he had a picture of it or something. And I remember thinking like, that is just so ridiculous. I can't even imagine anybody would want to watch that. And I didn't actually see the footage of it until years and years later. Like I think I only really saw it like maybe 2 years ago for the first time. I was like kind of kicking myself like, man, I should have I should have taken it a little more seriously, or at least been a little more curious about it, so that I could sort of learn some tricks and kind of get into the culture. But yeah, it's just always sort of in the background of like, yeah, I know that there's like these kind of miniature decks and people are like kind of doing tricks with them, but it never really like pushed me to go and spend time doing that. I was just very much focused on skateboarding at the time. And yeah, I just didn't really have any friends who were really interested in it at the time.
No, I get that. I get that 100%. So was the fingerboarding scene, I mean, were you really like involved with it here in the States, or were you more just like a hobbyist?
I wasn't involved at all. Like I always had a tech deck, like just on my desk, or in a drawer or something, that I would just kind of fidget with it. I'm very tactile and sort of my ADHD and OCD. So like, if I didn't have some kind of like skill toy that I was playing with, I would at least have a tech deck to like, just kind of play with and feel, because I was also really into like juggling and kendama and a lot of these other like skill toys, and yo-yoing was a really big thing for me at the time when I was like probably my like mid-teens, 15, 16, like really into yo-yoing. And that was like when also video on the internet wasn't really that easy.
Mhm.
So like if you wanted to learn a trick, right, you had to like go to a forum and like look at somebody's description of like, okay, put your finger here and do this and then wrap it around. And that's kind of how I learned fingerboarding tricks as well. Like reading descriptions and like, okay, they got like pop it this way and then turn it like that and curl your fingers. And so I think having a decent skill set when it comes to like yo-yoing and juggling and kendama like really helped me actually to pick up fingerboarding quickly.
It's funny that you actually mentioned that because I don't think I've ever talked about this, but all of the newer fingerboarders coming in, if you're coming into the scene basically from like 2015 on to present, you had videos that would literally step by
Yeah.
step show you how to do pretty much every single trick known to man.
Yeah.
When I started, like we would get on the internet and we would have to literally find a trick guide, not a trick tutorial, a trick guide. And it
Yeah.
literally step by step with like a screenshot or a diagram picture of like where to put your fingers, how to slide through your kickflip. Like it
Yeah.
was when you had to read it, look at the picture, read some more, look at the new picture, and then read some more,
Yep.
and then that was it. And then you had to literally figure out how to like apply what you're reading into an actual like movement, which is crazy.
Like I would say I was pretty hardcore into juggling and yo-yoing at the time. So like where I lived, there was a big group of circus performer groups essentially, like, hey, come learn how to ride a unicycle and juggle and yo-yo and stuff. And I was just deep into that culture for a long time. And even now till today, I still do it all: juggling, kendama, yo-yo, fingerboard. Like to me, it's all kind of wrapped up in the same sort of hand-eye coordination skill. And I'm glad to see that there is a lot of overlap with fingerboarders. Like there's Sweets, Kendama, and Black River. Like they collab on stuff, and there's just a lot of overlaps in those cultures. So
I know, I
it
love
really
it.
really drew me to that.
Yeah, shout out to Sweets, shout out to Crom, shout out
Yep.
to Grain Theory as well. Kendama is also switching, kind of getting into the fingerboarding movement and stuff as well. So I'm all about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When did you kind of get into the actual fingerboarding scene? So when did you go from this is a hobby to I kind of want to be involved or get involved, or it just kind of fell into your lap type of thing?
I want to say like around late 2022. I think I created the Instagram account Curious Boards like January 2023, so pretty soon, pretty new. And I didn't really know that much about like, oh, are there people who meet up and do this? Are there like competitions? Are there, I didn't really know any of that. So luckily, here in London, there already was a regular meetup, and it's hosted by Axe Ramps, who I think you've heard of as
Yeah,
well.
Apollo. Yeah.
Yeah, Apollo. Yeah, so Apollo and Simon, like they've been in the scene since like way back in the day, and they were hosting a weekly meetup, and so I would just go there, meet people, hang out, and try to learn tricks and stuff. And it really was the difficulty of getting stuff in the UK that made me think, okay, maybe I should like import some stuff and see if people want to get access to some brands that normally wouldn't be available. So I would say 2022 is like kind of when I really started to get involved, and then 2023 is when I early 2023 is when I actually started the company, when I incorporated.
Okay, so fairly new brand, but you've
Fairly
been
new,
around
yeah.
for a while. So you've
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
accomplished quite a bit in a very short period of time. Because when I'm looking at the brand, I mean, it looks very, very established. It looks like a 5 year plus brand.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I essentially wanted to first develop a team, and from the networking of that team and the connections of that team and getting to know those folks, that's how I started to build the brand. So first I did the team, and then I started building the brand. I wasn't really sure exactly what direction the brand would take. I just knew that I wanted to expose more people to fingerboarding and to expose more brands that maybe are, one person kind of operations who don't get a lot of exposure from, either the big brands or, from the US. And I saw that as a bit of an opportunity of like, okay, well, there's a huge amount of makers in the world that are producing fingerboard stuff, decks, wheels, all that stuff being handmade, most of it being handmade. Perhaps folks in the UK and other places want to know about those brands and want to get involved with those brands. And so I just started to basically do cold DMing and cold emails kind of late 2022, early 2023. And maybe I must have sent out 300-400 DMs to like any brand that looked interesting, or they had a product that I thought was kind of interesting. I would just DM them, and I would say like 80-90% like just never replied. But the few that did, in conjunction with trying to meet some really skilled writers to get their opinions and things on like which brands I should talk to. So it was just a lot of me trying to build relationships with brands that either have no footing in the UK or kind of obscure because of maybe the language or the country they're from, etc. And I really wanted to bring those brands out and expose the rest of the scene to them.
Man, you're out here doing the Lord's work. This is
Thank you.
that's admirable. I like that.
Yeah,
So
because it's huge. Like that's one thing that surprised me is like how many very distinct. I'm cautious about saying industry, but like in some countries there really is a regional, local fingerboard industry where they have their own contests, their own deck makers, their own wheels, their own trucks, their own tuning, their own tapes, their own pros. It was really interesting to me and exciting to see those groups develop their regional scenes. And, I thought, well, the London scene or the UK scene is mostly well known, established. There's a lot of pros and stuff that, are sponsored by Black River and other places. I wasn't really seeing the brand exposure. It was kind of like the same sort of stuff. Everybody kind of sold the same stuff. And I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to sell things that nobody else had and that nobody had heard of, and to build up that brand recognition, so that they could also improve their marketing and get their exposure around the world.
no, it's very, very hard starting out to get, any kind of traction in our industry.
Yeah.
And it's the American industry, the American scene, it is extremely hard as a new company to get a
Yeah.
foothold. There's a lot of OGs in our market. There's a lot
Yeah.
of established
Yeah.
brands and stuff in our market. And, I've said this in the podcast, probably 3 or 4 different times easily, but I mean, it takes a minimum of 2 years just to kind of get noticed in
Yeah.
our scene. And so, like,
Yeah.
if you're a deck maker and you haven't been making decks for at least 2 years, like, the chances of you really catching any forward
Yep.
momentum, it's going to be pretty hard.
Absolutely. I see that frequently with just do a search on, whatever social media network for fingerboard stuff, and you look at the just sheer amount of abandoned accounts that like basically drop off a cliff during COVID. It's maybe hundreds
It is
where,
literally hundreds.
yeah, they did like maybe they had one or two drops, maybe a couple dozen decks here and there, and then they just like never come back. So seeing all of that and thinking to myself, well, maybe there are some brands that would like to get more exposure, but they just can't on their own for whatever reason. They have day jobs and other things that they can't, spend a lot of time on. Maybe I can help some of those brands where doing everything yourself, making a deck or making wheels, doing the packaging, setting up a website, fulfilling orders, processing credit cards, like all that stuff, a single maker, you're not going to be able to put 100% into your craft. you're going to have to make some compromises in terms of time. And a lot of the times for a lot of these little brands, it's the customer service and the shipping and the ordering that is difficult part. And so you see a lot of these brands are just like, oh, DM me for orders, DM me. And that works here and there for a couple decks. But when you want to sell 50, 100, 200 decks, you really need to focus on that making part and leave that complexity of shipping and fulfillment and all that to the side. And one thing that I'm trying to do is to erase that friction for these new brands. So if you have an idea for an obstacle or a deck or something like that, and you don't really want to deal with all that fulfillment and shipping and all that stuff, that's really difficult, and taxes and setting up a company. I want to help you distribute. So I always reach out to new brands that I see that have some potential, and I ask them like, hey, maybe we can collab on something, or, maybe you can make me some decks here and there. And then I try to market that brand a little bit so that people are aware of it.
So before we open up the floodgates to every single small brand that literally listens to the podcast,
yeah,
I feel like there needs to be at least one or two disclaimers, but you're basically the fingerboarding Amazon. You're the fingerboarding version of Amazon in the UK.
I've heard that a couple of times from a couple of people. Yeah, maybe. I really am trying to build a global fingerboard distribution network, whether that is retail or wholesale and both. I really do want, or let me rephrase, I really think that a big barrier to fingerboard growing globally is access to product and access to brands. And the exclusivity of some brands and the difficulty of getting some of those brands, I think, reduces the general scale of fingerboarding around the world. And my whole idea was to make it easy for anyone around the world to get access to extremely high quality fingerboard products without paying an arm and a leg in shipping, and make it easy for them. Good website, good UI, good mobile app. I accept every imaginable currency you can think of, and the same for specific payment networks that certain countries have. Like in the Netherlands, everybody uses something called Ideal, so it's a payment network there. Belgium has certain things, so I'm trying to erase that friction. You don't just need to have a PayPal account to buy fingerboard products. You can use your home country's payment networks, and I'm happy to accept that. So I did a lot of work in the beginning to make sure that I could support all these different currencies and different payment networks, and have really quick and efficient fulfillment.
Well, as a person that used to literally have the largest physical fingerboarding storefront,
yeah,
I look at your site, your online store, and it is absolutely massive. I mean, don't quote me on this, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you probably have the largest fingerboarding website as far as product and SKUs goes I've ever seen. Like, I don't think I've come across another site that has more products than you do.
Yeah, I think that's true. It certainly was one of the goals of the site to be the largest and to have the best selection and to have the versatility of selection. As you know, like fingerboarders, whether they've been in the game for a long time or just starting out, everybody is pretty micro focused on the details, right? They want to know like this kind of deck size and shape and the mold and how the wheels are and the bearings and the tuning and all this. I just sort of said, well, I'll just offer everything. I'll try to offer as much as possible so that everyone can have a chance on every price scale, from the $15 setup to the $150 setup. It's all available. So almost everyone should be able to find something like kind of within their budget to get started. And that's been a goal from the beginning.
You got one of those stores where like you got to leave your credit card at home, but it's an online store, so you can't really do that. But there's an unbelievable amount of stuff on there. It's absolutely wild.
Yeah.
The store also started in 2022.
I basically did about a year of development work. I come from IT and sort of programming background. And so I basically did a good year of QA and development and trying to get everything to work well and integrations and all this stuff and warehousing and barcodes. And I could tell you, a story for hours about just like, no, there's no barcodes in the scene, right?
That is
Like,
very, very true. There isn't any.
and in order to have a scalable e-commerce website that supports the globe, you got to have barcoding. And so like creating that scheme and writing the software to generate the barcode out of the e-commerce stack and all this stuff. So yeah, I did all that work ahead of time to make it easy to start importing the product when I finally got it. I basically receive product. If I don't get something weekly, it's every other week. And I did a lot of work in the beginning to get like a UK import export license and have all the paperwork done in advance, and customs is no problem for me anymore. And, these things. So it's super frictionless whenever I want to buy wholesale from a maker or a big order from anybody. I don't need to wait for customs. I do my own shipping. I send the maker a label and they put it on their own package. All the customs paperwork's done in advance. So I'm really trying to get the makers to spend their precious, valuable time on their craft. And the frustration, the paperwork, and all that friction of doing business, I'm really trying to erase that for them. I want to say something like we have almost 500 deck varieties on the site, and that's like maybe 100 deck brands. And what you see on the site is not even the whole inventory that I have. It's just the stuff that I've processed. And so I have a goal of maybe like 300 brands or so. And the site grows in inventory every week. So I'm always uploading new SKUs and expanding as well to different countries.
So I think the last time we chatted, you said you were up to about like, what, 1,500, 2,000 SKUs?
Yep. I think something like that has been processed, right around that. I probably have another 1 to 200 SKUs that are in the backlog to be processed, and more stuff on the way. So I'm starting to split my inventory now between the UK and the US. Now I have a space in the States. So balancing the stock between two locations and making sure that when things sell out, it gets replenished quickly, and that the makers get paid quickly is also a big goal of mine. I've heard a lot of different things from different makers on how like shops buy and how people do deposits and don't do deposits and stuff. And I really just want the makers to get paid quickly and get paid on time, and to build that trusting relationship with them. So I always pay in advance. I always pay full. And I want to get to a point where if you are a brand and you do want to sell on my site and you want to increase your scale, I'm building some automations to, like, for instance, when stock gets to, say, quantity of 5 or below, it's just going to build a purchase order automatically, send the purchase order to the maker. The maker signs on a DocuSign. And then I disperse the funds. And then at the same time I disperse the funds, I also disperse the shipping label to them as well. So a courier, DHL courier, will come to that maker's house or their office or wherever, pick up the stuff for them. They don't need to go to the post office. And getting that scalability, I'm still working out a lot of the kinks, but I have some pretty good processes in place now. And so you're going to see that SKU count go up as the scalability processes improve. And that's one thing I'm doing with the barcoding as well, is like I could do it even faster if everything had a barcode. And so I wrote some software for my e-commerce stack to generate the barcode. So like purchase order gets generated, barcode gets generated with the purchase order. Then when that maker sends their products to my warehouse, the processor has a barcoded purchase order to scan against, so that they know that the order is accurate and all the quantity is there. And eventually I'll actually be shipping the barcode labels to the maker, and they can put them on their packaging. I've done a few tests with some brands and it's working well. So I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to do that soon.
That's wild. All right. So anybody who's been thinking about setting up a physical retail store or opening up a
Yeah.
retail store, I'm about to drop some gold nuggets for you. So Frank here has basically the hardest part about having an online store or even a physical storefront is inventory. Inventory management
Yes.
for fingerboarding is the hardest thing to do because
Yes.
it's not like you have a grocery store and you have like a weekly food truck like dropping off goods to your store. It's
Yeah.
not that way in the fingerboarding industry. Everything is handmade, usually from scratch. Everybody has their own schedule as far as, home, like depends on like the size of the order. So like, hey, let me go buy from XYZ company. Let me buy 50 decks from you.
Yeah.
Most small companies are like, holy crap, like 50 decks? There's no way I could
Yeah.
do 50 decks. It's going to take me like two
Yep.
months to get 50 decks out.
Yep.
And so, when you're talking about like larger orders, of like 20, 30, 40, 50 decks, some of these companies can't even do that. And so if you're talking like,
Absolutely.
hey, let me get a small batch of 10 decks. They're like, okay, cool. It'll take me 2 weeks to package it and another week for it to come out to you. Everybody in the industry requires your money up front. Extremely difficult. So, like, let's say I place a $500 order with a den company. I'm like, hey, I want like 50 boards or whatever that comes out to the math wise. But let's say I drop like a 20 board, order. I drop $300, whatever, and it takes them 3 weeks to, make the decks and get it to my hands. That means I'm out $300. It's sitting in void and limbo, for 3 weeks waiting for it to get here. Then when I get it, I've got to unbox it. I've got to, take pictures, descriptions, get them online, put them on my shelf if you're a physical restore, like a physical retailer. And then it's got to go onto the wall where people can come in and they can buy it. And so it may sit on the wall for a week, maybe two. And so now your $300 has been tied up for 5 weeks. When you're looking at, online stores, physical retailers, we have a lot of money in inventory just sitting in limbo, waiting for goods to be made, waiting for goods to get shipped, waiting for goods to get posted on your store, physical retailer getting onto the wall. It's extremely difficult. One of the main reasons why, my storefront wasn't very successful was because I couldn't figure out the inventory aspect of getting it online and also getting that product and stuff moved in the store fast enough. And so inventory for this is absolutely crucial as far as being successful, is figuring out each person, each vendor, a vendor being, a company or a brand, like each vendor has their own timeline as far as when they can get stuff out. You have some companies like Dynamics, I can usually get a big batch of trucks in like a week. Some companies, I got to wait 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe even a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you got to look at, oh, if I'm low on, batch of trucks for Dynamics, I'm like, oh, I can just place an order. I get it in 4 or 5 days, no problems. If I'm like, oh, I'm down to like my last two decks with this one deck company, I'm like, crap, I'm going to be out of decks for like 2 or 3 weeks until the new batch order comes in. And so there's going to be a void in inventory where, you make money on things that you sell. So if you don't have things to sell, you can't make money. And so if you're a physical retailer and you got empty shelves waiting on product to come in, that's a problem.
That is one of the biggest challenges. Maybe the biggest challenge is inventory processing and understanding like order flows. And I took a lot of financial risk early when I was basically testing to see which brands can fulfill properly, which ones can ship, which ones have struggle with scale or struggle with this or that. And one of the things that became very apparent is like, okay, I'm gonna have to basically have lots of loans out there uh sitting, and you know I could use that money to do other things or make more money or invest, right? So now I have a good idea of like how much risk there is for certain quantities of stuff, whether it's decks or wheels. But for the small makers, the sort of the one person shops, one dude making decks or whatever, usually they see that risk as a vote of confidence for them, and they will do their best to fulfill and to make sure things are quality checked, and you're not getting a lot of blems and stuff like that. But those relationships do take a long time, and like there's a lot of scamming in fingerboarding for some reason, and I certainly had lost a lot of money from certain brands that I either was naive and thinking that like, okay, they're an OG brand and they're fine to, give them a couple grand and, hopefully the order shows. But, I've also been like deliberately scammed by some brands as well. And at first I was thinking like, okay, I need to maybe like get some insurance product to help me with this risk. But now I kind of know what to look for, and I do a little more due diligence now than I would before, when I was just like acquiring, everything I could get my hands on. So I kind of have a good idea now of like, okay, that account looks a little dodgy. Maybe I'm not going to order from them, or maybe I'm only going to order like 10 or 12 decks instead of 50 or 70 decks. And now I have pretty good relationships now with some brands that I've ordered multiple times, and I always share my sales data with them as well. So that's one thing that maybe I am doing that not so many other brands are doing, where I really want that relationship with the maker to be as good as possible and as frictionless as possible. So I will tell them like, hey, it looks like people from the States are, really hot on this graphic or this mold of yours. People from Australia, they really like this motif or this kind of color scheme. Let's maybe do a collab for, this or that country or something like that. And eventually I will have some like real-time dashboards that every brand will be able to log in and see their own brand's performance on my website. And that's really where I want to get to, so that they're getting the right buying signals from not just from me, but from the public. Their brands can scale to where the market is kind of pointing them towards. So I do think that it's very difficult sometimes to know like what's going to be popular or what's going to be successful until you have that data. And you don't really get that data until you've, taken a couple of risks and, had that product on the website for a few months.
Yeah, you're giving me all kinds of PTSD. So here's what's crazy. I have pretty much kind of the same experience and stuff as well. And the interesting thing is, things that I think is cool doesn't necessarily mean that, everybody else also thinks it's cool. Because I'm buying things. Originally for me, my store, I was just like, oh, this is dope. I want that. Oh, this is cool. I want that. And then like, I buy it, I purchase it, I'm thinking everybody likes it. And then like it sits for like weeks. And I'm like, what in the world? And so it's very difficult buying things for other people, I guess you would say, especially people you don't know who they are. Like, I know that they're fingerboarders, but like, I have no idea. Like, if I buy this, these people are going to come in and be like, oh, I got to have this type of stuff. And then in the States, especially, the United States is so big, which you already know that from being here, but like, there's regions where like people are very well known in those regions. And so like, for me in the Midwest, like everybody knows who I am. On the East Coast specifically, like everybody knows who I am. On the West Coast, not so much. Like people have heard of me, but they may not have like, ever been to one of my events, something like that. I don't do a lot of West Coast stuff, which, I definitely got to work on that. But like whenever I was picking up products, I'd pick up, like some white mics. White mic is out of California. I want to say like Southern California, somewhere around in there. Very well known over there in the West. And so like if you got a white mic piece, everybody knows who like white mic is, and like they're like, I gotta have that piece. I love his stuff, yada yada yada. I bring, a California staple brand into the Midwest of Indiana. The Midwest scene is like, I don't think I've ever like these pieces are dope, but like I don't really know who this guy is. Like, is he somebody I need to know? Like, they just don't have that like following and stuff. And so like in their regions, like they could be a god. But if you move them out into the Midwest or even on the West Coast, someplace completely opposite, like they may not even be heard of. And so whenever you got a physical storefront, and you're picking up pieces, like it's cool to have pieces from all around the country, but not everybody, recognizes or knows that brand if you're not in that region.
Yeah, and some brands are much better at marketing themselves than others, regardless of how high quality the deck is or the wheels or whatever it is. So I do spend some time with some brands, like when I notice like, okay, they have a very high quality deck, or they have a special mold or something like that, something that gives them some uniqueness. but maybe their marketing is a little rough, or maybe they don't really understand like how to reach a global market. I try and help them with that a little bit if I can. We are developing some like sort of scalable marketing type programs for sort of small brands and brands that want to start up. Because you're absolutely right. Like there's maybe 1,000 makers around the world that is mostly known to certain regions, but there's not a lot of cross pollination.
Mm-hmm.
And the regions of scenes really do have their own like deck makers who everybody knows, and shapes and molds that everyone knows, and certain brands that are known for a certain state or a certain city or a certain region. And that's great. Like I think it's wonderful that there's these sort of like micro scenes within the scene, but getting those products to a wider market can sometimes be nearly impossible, or not without like quitting your day job or something like that. And so I really want to help with that to expose those. But you're absolutely right in that trying to buy stuff for other people is really hard, and especially like me, I'm pretty new, like only really like hardcore in like the last couple of years. I don't always know all the history of like OG brands, and this deck mold is like some special one from like 2008 and stuff. I don't know a lot of that stuff, so I rely on my team to really help me contextualize a lot of that. And I rely on a lot of my team to kind of tell me like, hey, this new stuff's coming out, this new brand's got some cool stuff, or my deck sponsor's coming out with a new mold, or whatever it is, so that I can jump on that quickly and be the first to have it, or at least be the first outside of their home market to have it. Because I'm not always looking at Instagram or all these social media things to like see like kind of where the ocean of fingerboarding is kind of going. So I really do rely a lot on them to help me, especially some of the OGs on my team that have been around for like since the beginning. They can really give me the history of like why this brand is popular, or why does it cost $200 for this used deck from this brand. Like those are things I don't understand. So I really need that context to kind of help me figure out where to invest.
It's great that you have a team that you can rely on for that. I unfortunately didn't build me like that kind of a team early going. And so when I was trying to get, sponsors and stuff like that from the tour, and I happened to get a sponsor or two that were, they gotten themselves into some hot water, whether the one had like underage girl allegations, another one had like some other stuff, some other drama and stuff. And you're like, dude, you probably shouldn't have them as a sponsor on your tour because, blah, 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 blah. Then I'm like, bro, I'm just trying to like promote fingerboarding. Like, I'm not trying to get involved in all this. And so,
yeah.
And so
that's a
like
tough one.
It is. And you got a team that can watch your back and stuff. For me, I'm already throwing logos on. Like I have no idea. Like I'm just trying to host events and do my thing, and like, things can get crazy real fast. And so
it's true. Those threads unwind really quickly in the fingerboarding, like more so than I think a lot of other similar hobbies, like the kendama world, the yo-yoing world, like juggling. There's a lot of, I would say, like cultural institutional knowledge in the scene that like really drives a lot of purchasing decisions and a lot of like sort of the hype cycle in the fingerboarding, right? It takes a while to figure out like kind of where the stability is for certain brands, and like what's going to be a good seller versus what's just a kind of a nice to have, or how to make that purchasing decision. So I do, I will say to my team like, hey, I'm thinking about like buying this obstacle, or like I want to develop a collab with like this brand, and then they'll like reply to me like, oh man, like 10 years ago they did this thing where they copied this like guy's ramp design, and like you don't, and I'm like, what, that's like 10 years ago, I don't know if it still matters. And they're like, it still matters, trust me.
The scene never forgets. The scene literally never forgets.
That's a good t-shirt, man. That's a good t-shirt logo.
Oh, that is a good t-shirt logo. Someone's gonna take this for sure. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's one of those like, and that's one of the, bad things too. Like you have to have a flawless record in the scene because one infraction, regardless if it's your fault or not, like can
Yeah.
literally ruin you and ruin you forever.
Yeah, yeah. It's a long memory in the scene for sure.
And
Absolutely.
so fingerboarding scene has got the most passionate individuals, which is, a good thing. And then
Hmm.
you have the bad side of things where like, it could be a bad thing at the same time. So
And it's also like there's a big age difference too in the scene of like, who cares about what. If you're a kid and you're just, saw some cool video on YouTube fingerboarding and you want to get a fingerboard and start out, like that purchasing decision is a very different set of conditions
yeah,
versus
yeah.
this OG guy who's, like maybe he's been sponsored, he's been in the scene 30 years or whatever. It's crazy to even think that 30 years, like, there's a lot of people in the scene that have been involved for that long. And they have deep, deep, deep grooves of
Mhm.
preference and brand loyalty. And so if you want to sell to them too, not just like the sort of beginner, what do they care about? Well, maybe having more specifications on their website, or maybe having like, different data for them, or a different filter on the website for them to sort stuff. All those decisions, I'm kind of learning as I go, but I do a lot of A/B testing on the site, so I somewhat use data to make those decisions. But a lot of it is just me asking my team, like, "Hey, what about this brand? What about that brand?"
Yeah.
And Instagram and TikTok and Reddit and Discord and all the other places where people talk about paintboarding.
Which is kind of crazy to think. I didn't even think about this. And I think this maybe because you're a little bit older than me, because I'm getting ready to turn 38 in like a week or two. That's July
Oh,
7th, July
youngster.
16th. So, but fingerboarding would have literally been in my life for almost 30 years and 2 more years,
Yeah.
which is absolutely crazy to even think about. And so, I mean, just like recapping, like just thinking back on like all of that, I'm like, that is absolutely wild. And like each stage of my journey, like my thought process has been completely different as far as
Hmm.
like what I liked, what I was into, why I liked it, my morals and values behind that stuff like that.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting to
Yeah.
kind of like, look through, 3 decades worth of fingerboarding and being able to pinpoint, each generation's view take and hot takes on things is kind of interesting.
Yeah. And also to see the brands that, were available and around back then, the ones that have still survived, like how they have either changed their marketing or changed their products, or, whatever they've done to have this amount of longevity. Some of these brands, like, 20, 30 years, like what are they doing right that's keeping them relevant for this long? And the brands that have fallen away, like what did they do to kind of become irrelevant? And how can I avoid some of that? Either new brands I'm trying to onboard, or trying to build relationships with existing brands, because the OG brands can be very skeptical of newcomers, and they don't necessarily want to dilute their brand through additional retail channels or additional distribution channels. They want to protect that, and so it's having broader access doesn't always get you the product. They just won't. Sometimes they won't sell to you, or sometimes they just don't make enough to sell to you. Right? You
Mhm.
want to buy 50 decks, and they make 20 decks every 6 months. Like, you're just not going to get the product. So you need to give something else, some other incentive or some other idea that will bring them on board. And a lot of the times it's just like, hey, I'm going to invest in you, and I trust you, and I'm going to pay for orders in advance, and try and be communicative and understand what it is that you need. And some brands are just very open to that, and some are not.
Well, a lot of it has to do too with the fact that, I mean, I could leave this for a whole other podcast, but
Yeah.
I mean, most brands are not charging enough money for the stuff that they're doing. Unpopular opinion. I mean, fight me in the comments for this
Yeah.
statement, but
Yeah.
if someone has 3 or 4 hours total combined into making a deck and they want to value their time at, let's say, $15 an hour, that's
Hmm.
$60 worth of labor to, make a deck that's being sold for $30. And then if you're going to
Absolutely.
wholesale it to, someone like you or someone like, who had a physical storefront for 50%
Yeah.
at $15 a deck,
Yeah.
these guys are literally valuing their time at literally pennies on the dollar.
I have a deep problem with that. And I try and always pay exactly what they ask, but depending on where the maker is located, like there are certain, regional issues that might change the way that they value that time or the value of that
Mhm.
product. But it's not like you can sell one deck for $10 and one deck for $100, even if that brand is well known. You need to provide some context for that $100 or that some context for that $10, so that people understand, this is a valuable product, and it takes time, and it's craftsmanship, and it's, all the details that go into making those products. It's a hard balance, because I say that all the time, especially to younger makers who are just starting out. I'm like, dude, you're making nothing on these decks. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I will just pay more. I will just tell them, like, hey, you should, don't charge, $15 wholesale, charge $25 wholesale or whatever.
Hmm.
And then the discounting for me on the retail side comes from the scale, right? I'm not going to
Hmm.
buy 10 decks. I'm going to buy 50, so that they can ratchet down the per unit cost and still get the value that they need back from their time and their materials and their efforts. But I also try and, if I see a lot of potential in a brand, I will try and help them scale. Like if they need materials, if they need equipment, if they need, help on like paperwork or something like that. I will try and help them with that, because like I said earlier in the beginning, I really want them to like focus on their craft, get really, 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 really good at doing the thing that they care the most about, being
Hmm.
an artisan, being a designer, whatever it is, so that I can erase that friction from them and, get their product to the site as fast as possible.
No, I feel that businesses, especially just small business owners, like
Mm-hmm.
they're good at maybe one or two things on their business, but they just aren't very good at, a completely different side of their business. There's very few people that
Absolutely.
are well-rounded all the way around. And so like even if you look at like me, everybody's like, dude, you're practically a one-man like army doing all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I have no editing skills. I have no graphic design skills. I can make you a flyer if you asked me to. Like I
Yeah.
I I could learn to do it, but like I don't have those skill sets. And so like, I'm lucky to have my buddy Brian who literally does all our editing, all of our graphic designing, website stuff like
Awesome.
that. Cause I'm like, I absolutely suck at that. But if you need me to host a 200, 300 person event, dude, no problems. I can do that on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
No big deal. And so some people are just like, that's crazy. But having a very rounded like individual who can literally do everything is very, very, very hard to find and very hard to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 It's a challenge. So I do, like whenever I make an initial order with a brand, and when I receive that product, if it's, the quality's been checked well and it looks really good, and I think that there's some potential here, um, I will just straight up ask them, like, hey, what do you need to go faster, or what do you need
Mhm.
to make a more, realistic heat transfer, or, improve your printing or improve your molds or whatever it is. A lot of the times I will ask them for a list, just like straight up, like, if you had a router, how many more decks could you produce? Or, if you had a lathe, how many more, wheels could you produce properly? Those types of things. And in the future, I would really like to have kind of I don't want to say like a fund, but like essentially it would be something like that, where if a new maker wants to come out and they don't really have the funds or they don't have the equipment to kind of do what they would really love to do, maybe we front that for them.
Like a
And
charity?
yeah, maybe like a grant would be a better
Okay, okay.
a better term. I'm still thinking about the details, but yeah, I've done a couple of experiments with a couple of really new brands that really don't have a lot of history when it comes to their brand awareness or their marketing, but their decks are amazing, super high quality, like a lot of potential. And, just like, hey, straight up, like, okay, you don't know how to do heat transfers, or you can't do it yourself. All right, send me the graphics and I'll take care of that for you and ship it to you. And then you can play or whatever. So that those little details, like that prevent some of these brands from growing, if I can erase that, they grow and I grow and we grow together, the scene grows and,
No, I love that. I love the fact that you're offering those variables of things that, people may not be good at or even know how to do. And if you do end up, formulating some kind of grant or charity or anything like that, like definitely hit me up. I like to be involved.
Yeah, for sure. I have a lot of ideas on it when it comes to that aspect of fingerboarding. And I do think there is a lot of room in the scene for a lot of brands to grow and for new brands to come on board. And if everybody's growing and fingerboard is growing worldwide, it's just helpful for everybody.
Yeah, no, most definitely. So did you start making decks first, or did the team kind of come in play first?
Yeah, it's a good question. Me personally making decks, like I'm not very good at it. I've done it, but I'm not good at it. And I recognize that for me to get good at making decks is going to require a lot of effort and time. And I don't know if it's really worth it. There's already like so many good makers out there, maybe I'd rather just collab with them or hear their just to design something for me rather than me do it myself. So I started with a team first. I kind of looked at generally, yeah, when I was looking at fingerboarding and looking at like what brands are kind of popular and who has a good online presence and a nice website and stuff, I just thought that building a relationship with a team and having that team do some marketing for me through their social channels and stuff like that is a way that I could build a brand at the same time while I'm working in the background on all the boring stuff, coding the website and doing the business license and all that, permits and stuff. So actually, I think it was like early 2023 when I started Instagram. I was already building a brand, even though I didn't have anything to sell, or even though I didn't have a website that was available. So the website's only been launched since March 30th of this year. So it's only been 3-4 months. But the brand was already pretty well known before I launched the site, so that there was a huge amount of pent up demand ready for the launch and ready for the grand opening. And I credit the team for that. I couldn't have done that by myself, and I wouldn't have known even, who to talk to or how to do that. And I wasn't a very good fingerboarder myself, so it's not like I could post some edits and like it would, go viral or whatever. So I really thought that building the team first was the right step to then build the brand.
That makes sense. Because I mean, in a sense, the team can definitely help you market and just give you that reach that, which is very, very hard to do, especially as a beginning brand and stuff. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then the other thing is like, I did look around at like, okay, what do the teams sort of look like in fingerboarding? The big brands, what do their teams look like? How many people do they have? Are they locals? Are they dispersed around the world? What's all that look like? And one thing I noticed right away is like there's a lot of underrepresentation. So I built my team from the starting idea that it's not going to look like all the other teams out there, and it's going to be geographically dispersed, language dispersed, not just a bunch of like white European guys on the team, but people from all over. I think we did a good job by that. I think we have like more female representation than any other team. We certainly have more geographic distribution than any other team. We have team writers in Japan, South Korea, States, UK, Europe, Canada, other places. And eventually I want to get to a point where we have maybe some regional teams, we have like maybe a Southeast Asian team, based somewhere in the Philippines, maybe, or North American team that's, based in Canada and Mexico and the US. Like those are the kind of things that I'm thinking about. And that actually helped me a lot in building the team, because there were people who were like a little skeptical, like, I don't really know who you are. I don't really know your brand. I don't really know what you're trying to do. But when I explained stuff to them like that, they were able to come on board and have some camaraderie with other folks on the team and, build some relationships outside of just, being a sponsored writer for Curious Boards, but building relationships within the team as well, because like I said, they're so dispersed when it comes to, where they live and time zones, stuff like that, language.
All right, so let's talk about the team. So how many team writers do you have?
That's a good question. Let me quickly pull up the team and I'll tell you exactly. 18 writers.
Holy cow.
And that is dispersed around 10 countries. And most of the biggest portion of writers definitely comes from the UK, but then the second is probably the States. And our writers we have writers in China, we have writers in Japan, Finland, South Korea, Italy, Canada, Netherlands, UK, US. So yeah, I'm very serious about like having a global team rather than just a bunch of my friends here in London like getting some free stuff on the side.
Gotcha. All right. So what are you looking for, I guess, whether you are like bringing, team writers
Yeah.
on board? Like, what's that vision? What's the goal?
The vision is there some uniqueness to that writer? Like whether it's a style, whether it's being known for certain kind of tricks or certain kind of speciality. Also, where they're located. Are they located somewhere where there's already like thousands of sponsored writers? Like maybe I'm not going to be so interested in that. What countries have underrepresentation? Like I would say a country like Finland, like maybe people don't really know that there's like scene in Finland and like how many writers that from Finland. Maybe we can, if we have a writer from that country, maybe we can not only elevate our brand in that country, but then that country's scene can also be elevated into other places as well. So it's a lot of that diversity in geography where they live. Are they doing stuff unique? Do they have kind of a speciality? Are they well known? Do they have a big following, or are they known? But that's not always the thing. Like I do have some writers who, like hardly ever post on social media. No one have never heard of them, but they're just so good that I certainly, want to support them. And also having a diverse, underrepresented team is very important to me. So, I'm always looking for like, are there maybe some female writers that people don't really know about, or, are super good, but don't have exposure. All those types of things I'm looking at when I'm building the team. The fingerboarding skill, of course, is very important, but I don't even know if that's in my top 3 of like things that I'm looking at for sponsorship. All of my writers are very talented, of course. I think that they're all amazing writers, but it's not the primary thing I look at. No.
It's interesting, being able to pick your brain a little bit because you have this whole global mindset, and where like a lot of people that I interview and stuff in the States, we all just think like, just nationally, like the US is it. Like, like we focus, yeah, like the US is definitely a big market, but like, having this conversation, you getting on the cast and literally just like talking about, global, like on a large scale like that, it's something that like, us Americans, we don't even really thinking, we're not even thinking globally. Globally for us is like, maybe we might do some stuff in Canada next door, like maybe, and then like, that's it. And so like, for you to just kind of come in here and just be like, yeah, we're talking about all these countries like I haven't even thought about like ever. And I'm just like, this is crazy, like, and so I'm like, this is you're taking fingerboarding to an entirely new level that like we're not even thinking about. Like we know it exists, but we're not even thinking about it. It's not even on our radar. And so it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That is a big part of the philosophy of the brand, and a big goal of ours is to grow fingerboard globally, to make the scene more interconnected, to expose brands and makers from certain countries that maybe do not get a lot of exposure in the U.S. market, or even in the European market, and just to make it easier for people to connect. I think we're doing a good job of that. I think that there's of course a lot more work to be done, but I really truly believe in fingerboarding as a global phenomena, or a global hobby or sport. I want there to be much more diversity in fingerboarding from either certain countries who don't get a lot of exposure, or maybe areas where you wouldn't even think like, hey, is there kids fingerboarding in the United Arab Emirates, or India, or South Africa, or Egypt? Like these are places where I feel like the fingerboard scene generally has not really tried to include at all. if there is, a group of kids, somewhere in Egypt who are playing with tech decks, what can I do to help grow that local scene? Maybe I sponsor an event, maybe I flow them some product or something like that to get them going. That's my strategy for a lot of these other places where we're not really thinking about fingerboarding. We think of Germany, we think of the US, we think of, maybe Canada and maybe the Philippines, some other places, but there is a big world out there with a lot of people living in a lot of big countries that get no attention whatsoever. And I'm trying to change that if I can.
No, I feel that. I'm kind of in the same boat as well. Like we're trying to get, competitive fingerboarding mainstream, kind of
Mm-hmm.
bringing light into, the fingerboarding space. There's so many people out there globally, but like there isn't any media channels that you can really kind of focus on that you can go to and be like,
Yeah.
I can, like if you want to watch golf, we have a dedicated golf channel, here
Right.
in the States,
Right. Yeah.
racing, dedicated, like if it exists, there's a dedicated channel or a dedicated source for it. And
Absolutely.
so fingerboarding doesn't have that outlet where, there's a website where you can see all the companies, all the drops, all the events, everything that's happening. Like
Mm-hmm.
there just isn't that information that's freely available yet. And so,
Yeah.
USAFBL is trying to, I wouldn't say like completely take over that void, but we're trying to like help push that along a little bit.
Yeah. I absolutely love what you guys are doing. And I think that the framework that you've built is the right model for bringing that exposure to the scene and getting people to think more about fingerboarding, not just as just a hobby I do on my desk. And, I film a couple of clips with my iPhone and post it on Instagram, but like a physical meeting space for people to come together and to share fingerboarding and to encourage each other and to develop relationships and build that community. So it's not just in this little corner of, maybe Rendezvous or something like that, right? There is a huge amount of events that are happening all around the world that not that many people really know about it because of, maybe language or time zones or stuff like that. I do think that the model that you created could be replicated in lots of other places, and it's scalable, and it's everybody knows what the expectations are, and they understand kind of like when you show up at a USFBL event, it's going to be XYZ, and it's the event's going to flow like this, and here's how the competition is going to flow. I think that is a really great model for bringing that kind of competitive fingerboarding, and also like spectator fingerboarding, like that's something that I don't think really much people are thinking about, but I think people want to come and watch it. I think people want to come and hang out, and like, when we were at Fast Fingers, like the amount of people that were just watching in the stands, like unbelievable amount of people are just watching fingerboarding that either themselves, they weren't personally in the competition, but they just wanted to be there and watch. And I think that's another big opportunity that fingerboarding can provide as well.
Yeah, no, most definitely. So like when we host our events, our competitions and stuff, I'm judging. So like
Mm-hmm.
for me, I'm really focused on, what they're doing and how they're doing it. I'm not really focused on like actually just enjoying what they're doing because I'm so busy
Yeah.
like analyzing what they're
Yeah.
doing. And so like
Yeah.
when you're judging and when you're actually sitting in the stands and like actually watching and enjoying what you're seeing, like it's kind of the same, but definitely two different, feelings and two different representations of fingerboarding. And so like Fast
Mm-hmm.
Fingers was my very first large scale event that I went to where I wasn't judging and I was able to
Mm-hmm.
literally just like enjoy the competitiveness, the high level of fingerboarding and just sit there and focus and just like take it all in. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was for me definitely kind of a game changer mentally because at that point like I was able to finally kind of see what I was doing with
Mm-hmm.
USFPL but actually being able to see like the direction of where this could actually go because this is in my opinion, easily televised. You can televise this pretty easily, and like
Oh
you can
yeah.
make this enjoyable to watch and enjoyable for people around the world to get into, and stuff like that. We're definitely making some leeway with it,
Mm-hmm.
for 2025 with regionals and nationals, which is what we're
Yeah.
looking to try to do. But I think that. Fingerboarding definitely has a long way to go, but I think that once it gets there, I think everybody's going to be pleased with what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. I I make the analogy a lot of when I'm talking to folks. Like, I feel like fingerboarding is kind of in the sort of the 80s, like kind of early 90s style of like where skateboarding was.
Hmm.
There definitely are official competitions and events that happen regularly, but there's also a lot of changing going on and a lot of new brands and old brands. And I feel like we're kind of in that space right now, like, in the early 90s when like kind of a lot of the incumbents were becoming less popular and there was a lot of new like sort of rider owned companies coming into the skateboarding world, and they were kind of creating street skating and all this
Hmm.
kind of stuff that really kicked off in the 90s. I feel like we're kind of in that space right now where we're like, I'm not really sure like what the right move is here and there, but we're all moving together, and there's just opportunity everywhere, and the scene is growing massively all around the world, and every year it grows. I look at those signals as, very positive, and those signals encourage me to kind of keep going and to develop fingerboarding. What I really like also about USFBL is that you guys have, good incentives for people to come and compete. It's getting prizes and getting recognition and all those things that come with competition. I feel like those incentives really help expose fingerboarding to a wider audience.
My thing with, just competitive fingerboarding, just fingerboarding in general is, it's always been a solo thing that most people do, but in my opinion, at least, so you guys can fight me in the comments for it, but like, I feel like fingerboarding is best enjoyed with other people, a social gathering type of deal.
Yes,
And so
I
like you can
100%
fingerboard all
agree.
day by yourself, but like for me at least, I have 100 times more fun if I'm hanging out with 4, 5, 10 people, 20 people that all love what we're doing.
Absolutely, yeah, 100% with that. I mean, I think Fast Fingers was one of the most eye-opening experiences in that regard because there was the competition, on the Saturday, but there was stuff on the Friday before, there was stuff after the competition, there was stuff the
Hmm.
next day. It was, 3 or 4 day event, really. I mean, a lot of the stuff I really loved about going to Fast Fingers was that interaction after,
Yeah.
meeting new people that I didn't know, meeting new brands, or like people I talked to online or I'd purchased decks from, meeting them in person and getting to, hear about their process and how they work. Like that's all really exciting. And also, hanging out with people in fingerboarding and talking about stuff like that was a huge benefit for me. And I think I will continue to go to Fast Fingers mostly for that reason. The competition is amazing and I love watching it and it's super exciting. But being able to talk to new people and meet new people and put a face to the brand
Hmm.
and learn about local scenes and stuff like that was really, really, really helpful. Like meeting Hongyu from Soldier Bar in China,
Yeah.
like unbelievable to see those guys there. Those two dudes from I want to say Finger Decks in Indonesia, but I might be wrong about that.
I think they're index theory. Yeah, index theory.
Like meeting those folks,
Hmm.
like talking to them about the Indonesian scene, that was awesome. I loved it. Even people in the competition that were from as far away as, Argentina and China and other places, just so inspiring to me to, people are willing to put the work in to support the scene and trek across the globe to go to a fingerboard event. I mean, to me, that is stunning. And it's a really big vote of confidence, I think.
One of the most beautiful things I think I've ever seen as far as like
Yeah.
humanity, like that one event having that many different like cultures, countries, just, I mean, all coming together. There was no hate, there was no racism. Like it was just
Yeah.
like a bunch of people gathering together and just, celebrating fingerboarding. And it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, a great atmosphere generally, and I think a lot of times in fingerboarding, online fingerboarding is it can be a little caustic in some ways. Like people clowning on a trick or a style, or, "Oh, it's not realistic enough," or like this, that, and the other. But then when you go to an event like Fast Fingers or even Rendezvous to some extent, like all that gets erased and it's
Mhm.
just people hanging out and chilling and like, hey, can you show me how to do that trick? Or like, we got a tip for how to do that? and everybody's very open and very eager to help, and they want to get to know you and talk about where you're from and, oh, what setup you got? Oh yeah, I got this, I got that. And it becomes this like really this communal like
Yeah.
aspect, which I really enjoy.
And that's where my start was because, like, I've always fingerboarded solo literally until 2021, 2020,
Mm,
2020. I literally have never fingerboarded with another soul until 2020.
mm.
And then when I went to that very first event, it changed everything. And I realized that, like, I've been fingerboarding off and on for 20 years, but never fingerboarded with another soul. And then, like, as soon
Hmm.
as I was able to fingerboard with other people, complete game changer. And then like that
Yeah.
moment, like it sparked something in me where like everybody's been doing this wrong. Like everybody's been fingerboarding by themselves and they've been doing everything
Yeah.
by themselves. And I'm like, I don't think that people realize that like this should be a group activity. This should be, a thing.
Hmm.
It's like playing basketball. Like, yeah, you can play basketball by yourself, but you go to the Y and go a pickup game changer. And so
Yeah.
it's just I feel like we've been doing fingerboarding wrong for so long, and we've been a pretty good advocate of basically just getting people out and about and all in one place and fingerboarding and celebrating the hobby.
I'm in 100% agreement. And seeing that many people, I've been to Rendezvous as well. And while it's not as big as Fast Fingers, obviously, but it still has that same sort of feel. Like, people coming from all over to one place to celebrate fingerboarding. Not a lot of sort of internet comment type snarking or, sniping at people. It's just
Mhm.
kind of people just doing what they love. And I also think that when you are around a lot of people fingerboarding, you look at things differently. You look at that obstacle like, oh, I didn't think you could like do that trick on that obstacle. This guy over here, he's like, doing something I never seen before. I'm gonna go talk to him about it. Hey, how do you do that? And usually they're very friendly and they want to talk to you and tell you how they're doing, and you get better. Like
Yeah.
you get so much better, so much quicker when you're exposed to a lot of people that are fingerboarding around you. Just like skateboarding, right? You have a
Hmm.
good crew you skate with, you
Hmm.
push each other, you help each other. I feel like it's just the same in fingerboarding.
So I think this is actually a good time to do our listen to win. All right, so we're gonna do. Should we tell them? All right, so basically, before the cast, we got together, and Frank here is basically doing the Curious Boards hookup. He is throwing in just a bunch of stuff. Tell them just kind of sort of what everything that they're gonna be able to get in this Curious Boards hookup.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely throw a couple decks in there, put some wheels in there, maybe you see some trucks in there. I don't know. A good sampling of tapes from all around the world, different brands, different tuning, so that you can really try a sampling of what is out there and seeing. There is many makers making a lot of cool stuff, and I'm just excited to be able to share those brands with everybody.
We call that here in the States. That's the hookup right there. You're getting just a fat pack of stuff. So we're excited for this. So we'll give them the challenge. We're gonna give them the challenge. So
All right.
we're looking for the most stylish inward heel. So we're
Yeah.
looking for the most stylish inward heel. So it could be flat ground, it could be over a ledge, it could
Hmm.
be over a stair
Hmm.
set, but we're looking for the most stylish inward heel. So this will come out Wednesday, audio wise, video on Thursday. This contest will end Friday, 5 p.m. London time or 12 p.m. Eastern time. So it gives you about a day
Excellent.
and a half, 2.5 days, depending on when you catch this, to record your most stylish inward heel, post it to Instagram, tag Curious Boards, tag
Hmm.
USAFBL, tag USAFBL underscore FBP.
Nice. I can't wait to see. I feel like inward heels is one of those tricks where it's like not super difficult, but it can be difficult to look really good.
Do
And
a stylish one,
stylish
yeah.
inward heel. Yeah, I just when I see a stylish inward heel, like especially if it's like caught kind of early.
And so Frank here is pretty much giving out pretty close to a whole complete. So definitely worth
Might be a couple of surprises in there. We'll see.
he's gonna hook it up. He's gonna hook it up. So super stoked on that. Once again, get it all in by Friday, 5 p.m. London time or 12
Mhm.
p.m. Eastern time. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait to see some submissions.
Man, so we've talked a lot, but we really haven't talked about any upcoming projects. You got anything that's in
uh
the works that you might be able to, leak on the podcast?
yeah, so we have a lot. We're basically we have a lot of R&D here at Curious Boards, and we're always working on stuff. I would say coming down the pipe pretty quick, you're going to see some very special wheels coming out. And I won't say too much about that, but if you went to Fast Fingers, you copped a little set of prototypes you've been trying out, maybe, and we're going to be making some molds for some riders. So we're going to have some signature pro molds coming out pretty soon for some riders. So, it's not just going to be a signature deck graphic, but it's actually going to be the exact specifications of that rider. So we've been working with a couple of 3D modelers and designers and the writer to develop a proprietary mold that fits their specification perfectly, and they get the deck that exactly to their liking. So, yeah, we're going to be announcing that probably pretty soon. We're still kind of doing iterations on that stuff, but we have a lot of products in development right now. We have everything from bags and storage to wheels and decks, maybe even trucks. I don't know. And yeah, we're just super hyped on working with a lot of brands, and we're going to be bringing some obstacles to market soon. Some convertible obstacles that you might have seen on my Instagram. I'm not exactly sure when, but in the next coming months, I would say.
Well, that's exciting news. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody has ever done a Pacific mold to a Pacific team rider before. I think that's that might be a first. I mean, if you know anybody in the comments, like definitely let me know in the comments if this has been done before, but I'm pretty sure this
I
might be a
know of
first.
one. I know of maybe one.
Okay.
And that's a shout out to Polowicz ramps. Back in the
Okay. So it's a
day,
UK
back
thing.
back in the day, he developed a mold with Low Pro, the OG brand Low Pro. So I think it's been like done here and there, but I don't think it's been done at scale before. And we're really excited to highlight the writers, and I feel like there's a lot the scene can do to support pro writers better than we've been doing. And one of the ways that I want to be able to give back to those writers for helping me and helping me build the brand is to kick down some cash down to the writers. So we want to pay the pro writers. Like, if you are sponsored by Curious Board, you're a pro, we're working on a mold for you, we're working on a signature deck for you, like, you should get paid for that. And we're working on a way to kind of scale that. And I'm hoping these experiments will be the foundation that we can use to bring more signature decks to the market.
Well, I feel that, I mean, that's exactly what skateboarding is doing. And so, they
Yeah.
all have team riders, they all have, their own pro boards. Everybody wants
Hmm.
to literally ride what they're riding and try to,
Hmm.
imitate what they're doing. And so bringing it down to a fingerboarding level, honestly, just kind of makes sense. It's a proven model. And so it's one of those things
Hmm.
like, I feel like it's beneficial. I mean, it could be a hot take for sure, but I think it's definitely it's definitely beneficial to the brand and to the writers. And I think it's a way for,
Yeah.
those companies to grow. And almost all these companies are literally reinvesting back into the scene. So I don't see a
Yeah.
reason why, having something like this or a system like this in place, would be, hurtful.
Yeah. Yeah. And the feedback I've gotten so far from different writers and just talking to people in generally, like, people are pretty hyped on it. I think it could open up a whole new level of fingerboarding where, like, maybe a pro who has been writing a standard deck for years and years and years, like, maybe they'll be able to unlock another level of skill if they can just, like, tweak the deck just a little bit. Maybe they want the
Mhm.
tail like this or the concave like that, whatever it is that they require. We're going to build it. So I'm super hyped on that.
Because even Black River right now is theoretically kind of missing the boat on that. So they've got, their world champion, Ramon Angelo. And, I don't know what kind of deck that he likes or style or whatever, but like they could be duplicating the world champion rider setup and people would hop on it like hotcakes. Because if it works for him, it obviously has to work for me, I don't know what
Yeah,
logic it is, but it's just the logic that always works. And so, if Ramon could
yeah,
do it,
yeah.
then I could do it too if I had the same setups. And so, Michael Jordan
Yeah,
has been riding that to the bank, for decades. Everybody wants
oh,
to be like
absolutely.
Mike, and we all buy the
Hmm.
shoes. And my
Yep.
shot still looks the same, but my shoes look
Hmm.
good.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that, and I think there is demand for people to duplicate the setups of their favorite pros or their favorite writers. We want to make that not as doesn't need to be something exclusive. We want to
Hmm.
be able to scale that up so that it's accessible to everyone and it's available everywhere. And and also like to build a personal brand of the writer. Like that's one thing that I'm really focused on with the team is like, for the writers who want it, right? Not everybody wants it, but for people who really want to put the time and effort into building their own like sort of signature brand, like
Hmm.
I'm with you on that. I want to help you build that, and I want my writers to feel appreciated and understood, and that I'm supporting them both in terms of branding, but also financially if I can.
Well, the thing that I love the most about it is it's not so much now, it's not so much about being a fan of the brand. Now it's about being a fan of the brand and the writer. And
Yeah.
so now you have two opportunities to, feed into your community because your community is just, they love what you're doing. And if you can
Hmm.
offer them these unique experiences, in my opinion, I call it an experience, which is to be able to, purchase the same setup that, your team
Hmm.
writer is using on a day-to-day, basis. That's that kind of
Hmm.
that's that connection that a lot of people are kind of like, I wouldn't say like need, but they're definitely missing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that there's a lot of space in the scene for that kind of elevation of the status of the writer. Like
Hmm.
there are certain writers that kind of everybody knows, like you mentioned Ramon, like, you know, not only from contest exposure, but just from like, making killer edits on Instagram and stuff like that. Like people know who he is
Hmm.
for his fingerboarding rather than
Hmm.
anything else. I feel like there's a big opportunity there that some of the writers could really elevate their personal brand in fingerboarding.
Yeah, no, most definitely. No, I feel that. I don't even think we
Yeah.
talked about your setup. What's the go-to setup?
Yeah. So like right now I'm super into Five Luck decks. Five Luck is a brand out of Canada, Saskatchewan, I believe. It's been making decks for a long time. He specializes in decks with a shorter wheelbase than a lot of the typical ones out there. So like this deck right here, this mold is called a Tech 5 Standard, and it's kind of like one of his main molds that he's aware of. And you can kind of see like it's really shredded. My favorite deck at the moment. Um, so it's like 95 on the length, 33 and a half on the width, or 34. And I got some prototype wheels on there right now that I'd mentioned before. So I've been
Okay.
rocking for a while.
They look like
Not
minis.
urethane. Yeah, and I'm rocking SB Trucks from Poland. He's a small truck maker out of Poland. He does a few drops every, maybe 2-3 months. I would definitely recommend if you haven't tried it to check him out. Not only is the design really really good, but the pivot and the turning radius is excellent on SB Trucks. So I'm always switching stuff out. Like I love changing tuning. I love changing wheels and deck shapes and stuff. So I typically am always using like 3 to 4 setups. But for the moment, I'm really into these short wheelbase 5 look decks.
Well, I'm sure you've got a decent sized list of people you want to give a shout out to.
Yeah, I just first, I want to say to everybody on the team, like you all make it happen, and without you guys, like I just couldn't. I couldn't build a brand. And there was a lot of setbacks in the early time of like, you know, getting paperwork in the government and permits and export license and all this stuff. And everyone's sticking with me. So I really appreciate that support. And I was able to meet several of them in person at Rendezvous last year and then Fast Fingers this year. So thank you to the team. Appreciate it. Thank you to the customers and the folks who's been supporting the site since day one. The traffic on the website, orders, etc., is all grossly exceeded my expectations. So I just want to, you know, send a thank you to all the customers. And of course, you know, my wife and my family, like putting up with me and starting this Singapore business, this crazy journey we've been on. Thanks to them as well. And I want to give a little special shout out to Chris Daniels as well, because, you know, early on in the early days, like when I really didn't know all the history of the OG brand and stuff, like he really gave me a lot of context on you know, who I should talk to and who I should reach out to. And I feel like even some of the team writers I wouldn't have known about if it wasn't for him. So, you know, he really helped me out in the early days.
He's really good for that. I consider him to be the fingerboarding historian.
Yeah.
I feel like if he was to pass away, like all of fingerboarding history would pass with him. Like,
yeah, I mean, the amount of knowledge in that guy's head about fingerboarding and like where it started and brands and everything, like just unbelievable. And I also want to say, like, the local scene here in the UK, like everybody's really supported me in terms of the shop, and also like Paulo and Simon at X Ramps really helped me out. Joe from Slick Screws, he really helped me out a lot. He really introduced me to a lot of folks. He developed some screws to help with strip base plates called Slick Screws. I don't know if you heard of them, but also a London brand based here. Screws are made here in the UK as well. So yeah, I just want to give a shout out to the local scene, and all the London folks have really helped us thrive, I would say.
I love that. We didn't leave anybody out, did we?
Probably. I wrote down a little list here. I think I got through it, but for those I didn't specifically mention, I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. I've got a few shout outs as well. First off, you know, if you made it this far, finger the like button. Definitely like, follow, share. Let everybody know, you know, we've got a pretty cool podcast, weekly episodes. Also, if you are watching or listening to this before everybody else on our Patreon account, we've got early access, we've got subscription boxes, and so much more. We've also got some sanctioned events happening here in about a week and a half. We've got Da Vinci Casso, that's Kevin Woods, Detroit City Skateboards, happening July 26th in Ferndale, Michigan. We've got CT Daniels hosting a sanctioned event in Chicago, Illinois on July 27th. We've got Zegheads doing one at Rockmart, Georgia on July 27th as well. And then we've got Fidgety Dex 403 hosting one in Strathmore, Canada as well. So international there. That's happening on July 28th. So very packed out weekend next weekend. So if you guys are close to those areas, definitely stop by and check out all the fun. Curious Board.
I wish I could go.
I know, right? So where can people find you online?
Curious Boards. Yeah, curiousboards.com, the main website. Curious Boards on Instagram, Curious Boards on TikTok, Curious Boards on Discord. You know, we're pretty much all around all social media network. You know, feel free to DM me if you have questions, or there's a chat on the website as well that you can reach me.
All right. And I'll also make it pretty easy as well for you guys. I'll have those links in the description for you. Frank, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and this project. I really think that what you're doing in the States for fingerboarding and fingerboarding generally is unmatched, and I just really appreciate the opportunity.
No, most definitely. I appreciate the kind words.
It was good to meet you in Fast Fingers as well. That was great.
Yeah, I had a blast.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
No worries. Until next time.
Yeah. Bye-bye.